In this tutorial, we're going to create a brand new Cloudways account. I'm going to show you how to migrate a website to your Cloudways account, and I'm going to show you all the features and settings to give you a complete walkthrough of how to use Cloudways. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below this video. I try to answer them the best I can. My name is Bjorn Allpass from WP Learning Lab. We help you get better at WordPress so you can earn more for yourself, for your customers, and for your business. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to click subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Now let's get started. To get to the Cloudways site, click on the link in the description down below. You'll end up on this page right here, and you can start with a free account. This is the only cloud host and only host in general that I've ever found that offers a free account. All other hosts offer a money-back guarantee, where you have to pay first, and then if something goes wrong or you don't like it or whatever, you have to request a refund, which is a bit of a hassle. Whereas Cloudways lets you try it out for free to see if you like it or not, and then you can decide to go forward or not. To get started for free, just click on the Get Started for Free button on the homepage here, or it's in the top menu as well. Fill in this quick form, and then click on Start Free. I already have an account, so I'm just going to log into the account that I have. And this is how your dashboard will look once this loads. There we go. This is what you'll be loaded into when you get started. And right away, you start choosing your server deployment. This is basically where you're going to host your site. So when you buy a hosting account from somewhere else that's not a cloud host, they already have servers set up. All you do is really add your domain name and install WordPress. Whereas with Cloudways, you can pick the servers you want. You can choose DigitalOcean, Linode, Vultr, Amazon AWS, or Google Cloud Platform as your servers for hosting your site. And that matters because these servers provide more resources than most other hosting accounts at similar prices, and they also allow you to scale up really easily if your site gets more and more traffic. To get started, we first pick our application. I'm going to choose WordPress version 5.7. I'm going to give this a name of RVing with Family Clone, because we're going to clone or migrate that site to here as part of this video. And these names in here are just for your own reference. And the managed server I will name RWF for RVing with Family, and project name the same. Then we can pick our servers. If you click on these tabs, it shows you server size options. When you're starting out, if you just have a few sites that don't have very high traffic, you can get away with 1 gigabyte. It says here it's recommended 2 or higher, but 1 gigabyte is enough. If we look at other hosts like SiteGround and we look at their hosting pricing for WordPress, pricing doesn't matter right now. For one website, we get, doesn't even show how much RAM we get on these smaller options. If we go to cloud hosting, it shows how much RAM we get. So we get 8 gigabytes of memory, which is RAM, for $100 a month. That's a lot. That's the starting plan for your cloud. Let's see if we can configure it for less. Okay, 1 gig. No, you can't go less than that. You can go higher, but you can't go less than 8. Here we go down to 1. My point is, at 1 gigabyte, you can fit multiple lower traffic websites onto this one server. And it says here when you hover over it, 25 gigabytes of solid state hard drive. And if you look at the cloud hosting over at SiteGround, it starts with 40, but if we go back, that's the $100 a month. That's really expensive. If we go back to here on the $15 a month, we get 10 gigabytes of space. For the $25 a month, the Grow Big, which is the plan that I have, you get 20 gigabytes of space, which is still less than what we have here on the first level, the very first option we have, which is the smallest option we can get. Suffice it to say, this is good enough for a bunch of lower traffic websites. And if you're finding this tutorial helpful, click the like button, because that helps this video show up for more people on YouTube so we can spread the knowledge and help more people with this information. So make sure to click like if you like this video. Here's a warning saying for production websites, you should go 2 gigabytes or higher. 1 gigabyte is for WordPress staging on low traffic websites. So we're talking low traffic websites, which is going to be most people. When you're starting out especially, you're going to have low traffic websites. You can always migrate them to higher traffic servers that you create, or just scale up the server you have them on. Either way, you can get started with this option for any one of these. You can get started on the 1 gigabyte option. Just scale it back, and that's the option you choose. Some of these have more options, like we have standard or high frequency. And high frequency on Vultr just means there's more power. Here it says, high frequency instances are powered by high clock speed CPUs and NVMe local storage to power your most demanding applications. When you're starting out, you don't have the most demanding applications. And even WordPress sites, even high traffic ones, aren't the most demanding applications. unless it's super high traffic. So you'd be fine on standard for Vultr. Choose 1 gig. And you can pick your location. You want to pick the location that's closest to your website visitors. If most of your traffic comes from the US, pick a US server. If most of your traffic comes from specifically New York and New Jersey, pick this one right here. If your traffic is in Europe, pick an EU server. If it's in Asia, pick an Asian server, or you even have a Canadian option here. And you pick the location that's right for you, and you're ready to go. Amazon AWS has a few more options. The scaling options are much bigger for AWS than the first 3. And these scale up to very high levels. 96 CPU, 192 gigabytes of RAM, that's huge. So your scaling capacity is pretty much unlimited with AWS and Google Cloud. And the smallest version is a 2 gigabyte RAM. For Google Cloud, smallest is a 1.7 gigabyte. Either way, when you're starting out, the smallest option on any of these will do just fine. And for AWS and Google Cloud, you can specifically say how much space you need for files, how much space you need for your database. If you choose one of these two, just the smallest options will do just to get started. And you pick a location down below. I'm going to choose Vultr, scale it down to 1 gigabyte, and choose Seattle. Let's keep it at that. And then click on Launch Now on the right-hand side. I was doing a lot of explaining there, so it took a long time. But when you know the options you want, it takes you literally a minute to set up a new server. Here we can get some free credits to get some more free stuff if we refer friends. So that option is available to you. And this video that pops up right here shows you how to migrate your site to Cloudways. I'm going to show you how to do that in this tutorial as well, but there's a backup in case you forget. It's right on your account in Cloudways. And it's currently adding the server. It's going to take approximately 13 minutes, and then we can start migrating sites to it. And if you've never used a cloud hosting account, this is a point of confusion, I find, is servers. Because like I said earlier, regular hosting accounts don't allow you to choose your servers. You just choose your plan, which gives you a different amount of resources. The more you pay, the more resources you get, which is you essentially choosing a different server or a better server on that hosting account, but they don't call it that. I think it's because servers and creating servers just sounds very complicated and hard. We just created a server in Cloudways, and it was pretty easy. And you can create as many servers in here as you want. And Cloudways is essentially a dashboard that allows you to access all your different servers on different providers. So Cloudways itself does not host your site. Cloudways is a dashboard that allows you to easily connect to servers like DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, Amazon AWS, and Google Cloud, which are much more technical if you're going to do it manually on those services. Cloudways just makes it easy, and they also charge for it. So the price you're going to end up paying is roughly double than what you pay going directly to those services. We'll get into more detail on that later on when we go over the pricing, but it is a valuable service because it makes your life a whole lot easier, and you can manage multiple websites on multiple different servers on multiple different services using this one dashboard. So we're going to pause this video until the server is added, and then once it's ready, we'll go from there. Our server is up and running, and here at a glance, we can see some information about our server. This first one shows how many applications are currently on this server. If you hover over it, it will tell you that. Applications installed in the server, currently 1. Projects associated with this server, currently 1. And members associated with the server, currently 0. And 3 dots. Click on that. We get more options. We can stop the server from running. We can restart it. We can delete it. We can add an application. We can transfer the server. And we can clone the server. And transferring allows you to transfer the server to another user account on Cloudways. So if you had a Cloudways account where you develop websites, and your client signs off on it and says, great job, this is awesome. Transfer it to my Cloudways account. Just click on here, and you can go through the process of transferring this server to their Cloudways account. And their site is then on their account, which makes development super easy. And to get to the settings for the specific server, hover over it till you see the hand, click, and there are a lot of settings for each server, which you'll see here. First thing you'll see is sftp and SSH credentials, so you can connect securely with FTP or desktop applications like Putty or Terminal, depending on which computer system you're using. If you don't know what those things mean, don't worry about it. It's definitely not required to use, but it is more advanced stuff that a developer might want to use, and that makes Cloudways attractive for developers. Under monitoring, we can see the stats of our server and monitor our server's health. Just going to load the stats right now. There probably won't be very much because we just created the server, but it should show something. We can see our RAM usage, our CPU usage. These are showing a value because we installed the site. So the server was doing something. It was working to install our site. the site we have there, the WordPress install, is totally blank, has no traffic. So if we come back to here in a few hours or maybe tomorrow, I don't know quite the time frame that it uses to judge or uses to calculate these stats, but this should be down to almost zero because there's nothing going on there until we get some traffic. Then these numbers would go up and up and up. As our traffic scales, the RAM usage and CPU usage would go up. And then eventually, when you have enough traffic, you'll have to scale up to a different server size. The lowest option was 1 GB of RAM and 25 GB of space. And this 7 GB is way more than you need to just install WordPress. So there's probably some scripts and files on the server itself that are required for the server to run. And every subsequent WordPress install would not be adding 7 GB, it'd be adding a much smaller number, but it would add up to your disk usage. And when you upload files to your site, as in media files like images or PDF files, or upload anything to the site, it'll use disk space. And then we can see application-wise details, which means every application you have installed on that server will have an itemized line on here showing you what that specific application is doing. And currently, as I mentioned at the beginning here, that these are higher than they would be for this site, it's showing 0 and 0 for CPU and memory being RAM, whereas here it shows values. So these values were for setting up the server, and then these were 0 because there's nothing happening there. There's no traffic, no nothing. We also have a details section under monitoring, which shows specifically your CPU usage, free disk space, reads per second, writes per second, and free memory. If you don't know what those are, don't worry about it. Again, that's for developers who are optimizing websites, or when you have server problems like your server's being overused, you might want to come into here and check these to see which items are spiking, which items are higher than they should be. You can get approximate levels of what they should be just by Googling it. New Relic is an integration with Cloudways. If you don't know what New Relic is, again, don't worry about it, for developers. If you are a developer, then you know what New Relic is. Under Managed Services, it shows us what services we have running on the server. All these are very similar to what you see in a regular hosting account, only here you can turn them off, you can restart them, you can stop them, you can enable them or disable them as you need. And most users won't even need to be in here. I just want to show you that it's here. And in case you need to, for some reason, restart memcached, you can do that here. And if you're a developer, you'll really appreciate having access to these options individually to restart and disable them. Settings and packages allows you to set a lot of the technical details of your server, like execution limit, upload size, memory limit. These are two big ones that even regular users encounter. The upload size is the maximum size of file you can upload to a WordPress site. So if you had an image that was 11 megabytes, which you probably shouldn't be uploading anyway, but if you get them from stock footage sites, the images are often quite large and they can be way bigger than 10 megabytes. So if you have, for an example, 11 megabyte image, it won't be uploaded. It will say you've exceeded upload size. If that happens and you really need to upload that image, or you want your users to be able to upload big files, you can change the upload size right here. You can change this to any value you want, like 30 megabytes. I wouldn't recommend changing it to 3,000 megabytes because then someone might abuse that and just upload these mega files, which will take bandwidth on your site and make your site super slow or even crash for external traffic trying to get to your site. So don't make this too high, but you can make it higher. I'd say less than 50 megabytes. There are very few cases where you need people or you yourself need to upload something that's bigger than 50 megabytes on a regular basis. If you needed to upload something that's 50 megabytes one time, you could come in here, change it to 50, upload it, and then change it back to 10, because you definitely don't want the uploads to be abused. The memory limit is often a limit that's exceeded as well for many WordPress users. It basically is a limit of how much a PHP request can access, how many megabytes of memory a PHP request can access. And depending on which plugins you're using, some plugins can use a lot of memory when they're working. And you might have to increase this number. 128 is quite large. Most hosts, I think, default to 64. So 128 is bigger. And 256 is the highest I've ever seen a memory limit required. So you can just change it to 256 here. And you shouldn't have any memory limit issues. But if you do, you can come back here and change it. You can choose to display errors. Yes or no. This is when an error happens on WordPress. Do you want to show the error on the page? This is good for debugging purposes. So if you're trying to figure out why a problem is happening, it's great to see the error message. It's not great for regular production websites because then if someone's trying to hack your site or do bad things to your site, they can generate these errors and possibly get information to help them compromise your website. You have error reporting options. This is for developers as well, but you can basically have a file where it shows a list of all the errors. And the PHP time zone, I'm going to check or use Pacific time, and then save changes when you're done. And if you have any questions about these options, every single one has a little eye beside it and a little tooltip that pops up that explains what each option is. And you can also Google it for more information. And there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube about these specific things as well. And a lot of it's for developers, but sometimes regular users will need this as well. Specifically upload size and memory limit I've seen quite often just for regular users. Under advanced, we can choose the max input variables. I've seen this for regular users as well. If they use a plugin like Optimize Press, I believe that requires a lot of input variables, more than what's usually allowed by default on hosts. So you have to bump that up. And I'm not going to go through all these options because most of them are developer focused, and you can hover over the eyes and it'll explain what they are. I'm going to choose a MySQL time zone and then click on Save Changes and then go to Packages. Here you can set your PHP version, your MySQL version, and you can upgrade and downgrade these with a click of a button, which is something that most other cloud providers cannot do. It's much more difficult. Elasticsearch enabled or disabled, Redis installed or not installed, supervisored installed or not installed. If you don't know what those are, hover over the little eye, that'll explain it, and that one doesn't explain it very well, so we have to Google that to find out what that is. Redis cache is for page speed, and supervisored, I don't know, but you can easily Google it, just copy the word, copy and paste over in Google and find out what it is. For most people, these are not required. There's a lot of developer options in here where people who know what they're doing on the development end would appreciate having these options. Regular users like you and me, we don't even really have to come into these settings. We just launch our WordPress site as an application, log in, and get started. We don't really need these settings. But I want to show you the settings so you're aware that they're here because you might need to come here in the future. Under optimization, we can pick and choose which things we want to optimize. This again is more for developers, or you got to Google it. There's help pages on Cloudways that explain what all these things are. But if you're approaching your size limit, we have 25 gigabytes. If you're approaching that limit and you want to see if you can knock that down a little bit so you have more space available, this would be the place where you would do that. You can also choose automatic over here, and it will clean up things automatically. That carries a little more risk. That's something that will be deleted that shouldn't be, but you have that option for automatic cleanup here. Over on the maintenance tab, you can schedule server maintenance. And this is server maintenance that Cloudways does, not you. But as opposed to other services that say, we're going to do server maintenance on Friday, the 28th at 3 a.m., and that's it. You don't have any options. That's just when it's happening, and your site's going to be down at that time. On Cloudways, you can actually schedule what time you want maintenance to happen. So maintenance is performed during the window of 2 to 3 a.m. UTC, but if that's not a good time for your business, you can actually change it here. You could say, maybe I want my maintenance done on Fridays at 2100 UTC. Click on Save, and that's when server maintenance is going to happen on your specific server. You can have this be different for every server. So if you have clients who are in Asia versus clients who are in Europe, very different time zones, you could have different UTC times for the maintenance so that the sites are down at times when traffic is the lowest in their particular areas, which is super useful. On the security tab, we have options for blocking IP addresses. We can choose to allow all IPs except those blocked by Cloudways itself. Cloudways, of course, has a lot of data on which IPs are doing nefarious things on their network, and those will be added to their block list, which you can then take advantage of. Or you can block all IPs and only add the ones that are on the IP whitelist right here, which might be just you. Maybe you're the only IP that you want to have access your Cloudways account. To find your IP, just Google, what is my IP? There's the IP right there. Copy that, paste it there, click on add. And now only this IP is going to be able to use SSH or sftp. Click on Save Changes if you want to save that. For MySQL, we also have security options. This allows you to define IPs that can access MySQL remotely. This is not something that's commonly done for regular WordPress users. This would, again, be a developer-focused option, but you'd have to whitelist your IP. Just add the IP in here, not your IP, but the specific IP that's trying to access your MySQL database remotely, which actually it might be your IP, but it might not be. Anyway, you add the IP to the whitelist, and that's the IP or IPs that are going to be able to access MySQL remotely. On the vertical scaling tab, we can increase the size of our server. This would be when we start running into our limits of 1 gigabyte RAM, 25 gigabytes disk space, and our CPU usage, which we don't see up here, but we saw it on the monitoring tab. Then you just come in here, click a higher level. It shows you what the details are. Go to 32 gigabytes, 640 gigabytes of solid state drive space, 6 terabytes to transfer, 8 CPUs, which is the core processors, and it shows you the prices for those. And you click on scale now, and then your server will be scaled up to that amount. But note that for Vultr here, it says it right here, you can only increase the size, and scaling down you can only do by cloning the site and choosing lower specs. So if you increase the size, keep that in mind. If you want to reduce it later, you have to clone the site and make a new server. On the backups tab, we have our backup settings. We can choose the time of day it backs up. You want to pick the time that's of lowest traffic. You can find this in Google Analytics or even the logs on the server itself to see when traffic is the lowest. Backup frequency, every 6 hours, 12 hours, every day, every 7 days. The one you want to choose depends on how often your site is changing. If you're uploading new content or creating new content every single day, you'd want to back up every single day, because you don't want to lose any content you uploaded previously. If you upload or create content every 7 days, then back up every 7 days. That way you always have a backup of the newest content on your site. And the backup retention will also vary based on the options you choose here. If you choose backing up every day, you can have a 1 week retention or a 2 week retention and get away with that, no problem. But if you back up every 7 days, you might want to extend this to the longest option available, which was 4 weeks. Then you have 4 backups. If you only have 1 week here, you only keep 1 backup, which might not be enough. If someone hacks your site, hopefully you notice within 7 days, but you might not. So you want to make sure you have a backup that is clean and that you can revert back to. So I would choose for the 7 days option, either 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You should notice by then whether your site was hacked. Either way, these are the backup options. Let's just choose some random things here. And local backups, if you're backing up off-site already, you probably don't need to have local backups, but you might need them for whatever reason. Here's where you allow them, but only saves 1. And here it shows the current size of our off-site backups, which is currently 0 megabytes, and this application has not been backed up yet. It would show the date here when we back it up, or when it is backed up. And the on-demand backup allows you to back up right now, clicking this button right here. Something that's very important to keep in mind is backing up does cost money on Cloudways. So every time you back up your site, there's going to be a charge for that. The charges are outlined on this page right here, where it says we charge 3.3 cents per gigabyte of backup storage. Irrespective of server provider and location, the monthly backup charges will depend on how often your application data changes. Incremental backups copy the files that have been changed from the last full backup. So depending on how often you change your site, how often backups are done, how big the backups are, you're going to be charged various amounts for backing up. And this is the charge per gigabyte right here, which is pretty inexpensive per gigabyte, but it is an additional cost they have to factor in if you're considering Cloudways. SMTP is the outgoing email from your server, and you can set the specifics right here. You can use your own SMTP or use Elastic Mail, which integrates with Cloudways. Something very important to note as well is Cloudways does not provide an email inbox. This SMTP is different. For example, if you have a security plugin like WordFence installed, it's going to email you when changes happen on your site or whatever you have the settings set to. There's a lot of plugins that will email you for things happening on your site. And that email will be sent through whatever you set up here. But if you wanted to have your own email address, like bobby@yourdomainname.com, that is something you'd have to get from Rackspace or G Suite, and then change the MX records in your domain at your registrar, like GoDaddy or Namecheap, and then you'll send email through those services using your domain name, but you can't do that with Cloudways. That's something you can do with most other hosts, but cloud hosts out of the box don't give you that capability. Maybe that'll be added in the future, and maybe it won't. I don't know. Now we've gone through all the settings for our server, and this server may host multiple websites. You can also do settings for the individual websites as well. So if we go back to where we were at the very beginning, which is the servers tab here, if we switch it to applications, we see the sites that we actually have, or the applications we actually have running on our account, and which server they're in and which project they're in. Now, if we click on here, we have even more settings. Some of them are quite similar, some of them are quite different. We have the access details here to log into our site. You notice the URLs are some crazy generated URL. We can add our own custom domain name, which we will in this tutorial, but by default, it's a crazy URL right here. And under monitoring, we have analytics and logs. You can check the traffic, PHP, MySQL, running crons, and disk usage. Let's go to the traffic tab. Right now, it's probably 0 because this was just installed. And we actually do have some traffic. Look at that. This must be some kind of bot that scans newly created websites, or maybe Cloudways has their own bots. I don't know. Either way, that's where you check the traffic. There's a bot traffic tab specifically for bots. See what shows up on here. Nothing. So these are specific IPs that are accessing your site, not bots. Either way, it's not real traffic because the site was just created. We also have logs, access logs and error logs. This is what you want to access if there are issues or you want to see who's accessing your site. There's a bot protection tab. This allows you to block traffic from bots if you want to. There are some bots that aren't very nice. They just scan all the pages on your site as fast as possible, which increases your CPU usage, increases your bandwidth usage, and slows down your site for real visitors. Those are the kind of bots that you can block in here. And at the very bottom, it also shows login attempts. If you are the only admin and the only person logging into your site, you should only be seeing yourself as login attempts. But if you see others, then you can block them from here. In our domain management, we're at our primary domain in a little bit. Cron job management is not something regular WordPress users need to worry about, but for developers, the options are here. SSL certificate, we can add them here. We have Let's Encrypt as a default option, but you can also choose you already have a certificate or you don't have a certificate, and you can create one if you wanted to. And these ones are usually paid, but they're also higher security than Let's Encrypt. And Let's Encrypt has to be renewed every 6 months, I believe, which is usually done automatically. These other ones go for yearly contracts, I believe, when you buy them. And they're, like I said, higher security. But Let's Encrypt is good for most websites. You just add your email address and your domain name, click on install, and boom, done, it's installed. Backup and restore. This is different than we saw earlier, which was a backup of the complete server, whereas this is a backup of this individual website. And I was saying earlier, I was referring it to as a site, even though it was a server level because there was only one site installed. I should have been saying this is the server level backup because that's what that was before. And here we have the individual site backups. And if there's a problem on your site, you just pick an older version of your site, click on Restore Application Now, it restores it, boom, everything's up and running again. Super simple. You can deploy via Git if you want to. Again, this is something developers would like to see. Regular users don't really need this. And application settings allows you to set specific settings for your site, and the majority of this is also for developers. It's not something we regular users need to worry about. We can change the memory limit for specific websites here, and the execution time for specific websites if we want to. The other one again was server level, and varnish settings are over here. Developers only, migration tools. This allows us to migrate a website, which we'll do in just a few minutes. And the Cloudways CDN can be configured here. And this also comes with extra charge. You'll be charged $1 for 25 gigabytes per application. Additional consumption will cost 4 cents per gigabyte. So keep that in mind. Most CDNs cost money. There are very few free CDNs. They might come with some services that are bundled for free, but the majority of them, like Bunny CDN and Max CDN and all those guys, they all have a monthly cost associated as well. But instead of using them, you can use the Cloudways CDN and have that integrated right into here. So here we enter the primary domain that we're going to use for the website. You would register this domain somewhere else. For example, Namecheap allows you to buy domains. When you have a domain on Namecheap, you can enter the domain name here, and then you change the DNS records on Namecheap to redirect to the specific app on the specific server in your Cloudways account. I've linked the tutorial in the card up above and the description down below that shows you how to do that with Namecheap, that process I just described. But in my case, I'm going to use a subdomain because I'm transferring my rvwithfamily.com website to here, but I don't want to use the main domain. I want to use a subdomain because I want to keep my main website still live and still functioning. So I've created a subdomain in SiteGround, which I'm going to redirect to here. I have a tutorial that shows you how to do that as well. Linked in the card above and the description down below if you want to see how to do this in SiteGround. And the way I explain it in SiteGround, it works very similarly for any other host, any other cPanel host that you're using. So if you're not using SiteGround, but you are using a cPanel host, you can still follow the instructions in that video. The appearance is different, but it still works the same way. The only reason I'm doing this way is because I'm transferring the existing website that I don't want to lose, and I want to use a subdomain on Cloudways for that website. And my subdomain is cw.rvwithfamily.com. It says here primary domain. but this is the primary domain for this application in Cloudways. It's not the primary domain of the website that we added the subdomain to. A little confusing, but once you wrap your head around it, it makes sense. So we add that, click on Save Changes to update that. And now we need to, once this is saved, point the traffic from that specific domain to this specific application. And I'll show you how to do that once this is saved. In the meantime, we can open up our SiteGround account. Let's log in, go to websites, close this, find RVing with family. And we're going to go to the domain tab and then the DNS zone editor. Here we have our main domain selected. I'm going to choose the A record, put in CW, that's the subdomain that I've created in SiteGround. And this will then redirect all the traffic that tries to access this subdomain to the IP address that we enter here. And the IP address is, now this is saved, we can go to access details and click this IP that copies it to your clipboard. That's the public IP of our website. We can paste that in here and click on create. Now this sometimes takes a little while to work. It usually doesn't work right away. The way we can test it is we actually open this website. So if this comes back with some kind of error message, it's not set up yet. If this comes back with a new WordPress install, then it is ready to go. So let's see what it looks like. And here's our new WordPress install on this domain. So that's sweet. Let's see if we can log in. Connection is not private. That's fine, don't worry about that. This is something we'll set up. So we go back into Cloudways to find our admin panel login, which is right here. There's the username. Paste that in there. It's pre-filling my login details for rvingwithfamily.com, which is not going to work because it's not the same site. Then the password, click on it to copy it. Even though you see all dots, you can still copy it just by clicking it. And you paste that in here, then click on login, and now we are in. That's fantastic. Let's pretend this is a staging site, for example, where you're testing changes and doing things on a test site of your production site in a subdomain, but you don't want search engines to index it. We go to settings and then reading, and we check this box, search engine visibility, click on save changes. This will discourage search engines from indexing your site, but it's up to search engines to honor this request. So they might find the site, index it anyway, but if you want to be super careful, you can install a plugin like WP Maintenance, which will basically block access to your site. You have to log in, then you can see your site and work on it, but search engines don't see anything besides a login screen, which is a great way to go if you're making a staging site. You can also have clients log in there as well, on a side note, and then they log in, they can see the site progress, and everybody's happy. So now we have our site created and it's redirected to Cloudways and we can access it and everything's cool. What we want to do now is migrate the rvingwithfamily.com website to this website, so we're going to have a clone of it. To do that, we have to log into the rvingwithfamily.com website. You have to log in to the site that you want to migrate to Cloudways. So let's do that. rvingwithfamily.com. Should have gone to login page. Log in, go to plugins and add new, and look up Cloudways. That should bring up the plugin we want. This is it right here. Cloudways WordPress Migrator. Install that, activate it, and now we enter our details. First our email address, and then check this box, then click on migrate. And then we enter the information from our Cloudways account into here for where we're migrating this to. So the first thing we want is the destination site URL, which is cw.rvingwithfamily.com. Then we want to add in our sftp host server address, which is an IP, as we see in the example. So let's go back to Cloudways. Server management up here. And here it says it has sftp login credentials, IP, username, and password. Do not use those if you're migrating a website. Make sure you're under applications. And it should say application management up here, not server management. And then we create our credentials right here. Make the username just my name and that the password. Click on add. You might want to have a more secure username. Password's pretty secure, but make a secure username as well. I didn't because I just want to be able to do this without copying and pasting between a bunch of applications. So either way, make it more secure. Mine's not super secure. We want SFT username is right here. We want Bjorn for that. The password is that. The SFTP host is this one right here. This is the IP address. Paste that in there. And the database name is right here, MySQL Access, database name. Copy that. Paste that in there. This asks if there's HTTP auth enabled, which means you have to log in to access the site. This is more often than not disabled. So you choose no pretty much every time. So that's the site we're migrating to. Now we have questions about the source site. Any root directories you want to migrate? I'm going to choose no. Is the site password protected? Also no. Just pick the defaults. Then we click on migrate and cross our fingers that we did everything right. If we didn't, some kind of error is going to come back. And we'll have to see what the error is and try again. The migration is complete. Now if we navigate to the site, it should look just like the original. So here's our cw.ourviewwithfamily.com site. This is the one we just migrated to, and it looks like all the content's there. Now if we compare this to the actual live website, which is just ourviewwithfamily.com, we see it looks identical. At least the homepage, top part of the homepage, and this content here, pretty much the same. So we can see the ads aren't showing up. We see ads over here from AdSense. This is on the live site. They're not showing up on the subdomain because you have to approve this subdomain in your AdSense account. So people can't just go and steal your ads and then do a bunch of fraudulent clicks and then get your ad account banned. So there's safety measures inside AdSense that wouldn't allow this to just appear. You'd have to get this site approved in your AdSense account before ads appear. Now the next thing we want to do is get this not secure message to go away. To do that, we go into our Cloudways account, switch to applications, and then click on it to open the settings. Go to SSL certificate. I'm going to choose Let's Encrypt. I'm going to put in my email address. And we're going to put in the domain right there. Let's take off the HTTPS and the backslash. Not going to apply wildcard. Wildcard would be for subdomains. So if we had Let's Encrypt installed for the main domain and we applied wildcard, that would then apply to all the subdomains. In this case, it is a subdomain, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to click on Install Certificate. It's going to wait while this happens. This is usually pretty quick. The installation is all done. Now we have to click on Enable HTTPS, which will create a 301 redirect from HTTP to HTTPS. Here's the example we would have for a subdomain. All it does is make sure that any traffic that tries to access via the non-secure one, HTTP, is redirected to the secure one, HTTPS. Click on Enable, and that redirect should be created right in Cloudways. Let's take a few moments for that to happen. HTTPS redirection is now complete. It's not quite what it said, but that's the gist of it. I paraphrased. Now it's all set up properly. Here it shows when it will expire, which is just in a few months. You can click on Renew Now to renew it whenever you want, really. Or if you enable this option, it's going to auto-renew whenever it expires. The last thing we have to do to have a fully functioning website is get an email address. Cloudways does not offer email services, so we have to get them from a third party. In this tutorial, I'm going to use Rackspace. If you click on this grid up here and then go to Add-ons, there is a Rackspace integration right here. And you may know that Rackspace is an email provider separate from Cloudways, but with this integration, we don't have to actually create a Rackspace account over on Rackspace. We can do it right here through our Cloudways account. And it's also cheaper. It's half the price doing it through Cloudways than going through Rackspace. So you're going to save money by doing it through your Cloudways account. MX records are just techno speak for where do you want these emails to go. When an email is sent to your domain name, where should they be sent after that? In this case, we want them sent to Rackspace. So it's really nothing beyond that. It's not super complicated on the surface, and we don't have to go any deeper than the surface to do this properly. The MX records we have to set, we can find inside of a help doc. And this help doc, I've linked to in the description down below. And midway through, we see a list of our MX, TXT, and CNAME records to set up Rackspace on our domain. We have to add these to the domain, to the subdomain in our case, in SiteGround, because that's where the main domain is hosted, the root domain. If your root domain exists in GoDaddy or Namecheap or Bluehost or HostGator, you need to update these records inside of wherever that domain name is. And it's a little confusing, but if you If you bought a domain name from GoDaddy or Namecheap or anywhere else, if you have not changed the name servers, then you will add these to GoDaddy or Namecheap or wherever else. If you have changed the name servers to point your domain to a hosting account, then these have to be updated in that hosting account. In my case, we have our subdomain added to a root domain inside of SiteGround. In our SiteGround account, we're still on the same page we were earlier in the tutorial under rvingwithfamily.com, domain names, and DNS Zone Editor. In here, we can add various records. We want to add MX records as defined right here. So type MX host name. We want to add a CW in our case because we're using a subdomain. If this is for your main domain, you just leave this blank or add the @ symbol. We want to copy this as a destination. We need a priority of 10 and a TTL of 3600 seconds or lowest allowed. So if you're using a root domain, do not change this name field. In my case, I want to add CW because it's a subdomain. TTL 3600 seconds is the same as 1 hour. In SiteGround, we can go right down to 1 minute. And it said we should choose 3600 or the lowest allowed. Lowest allowed is 1 minute, so we're going to use 1 minute. Priority of 10, destination of that. Then click on create. And then we do that again for the second MX record. All the same stuff except for a different server and a different priority. Add the CW in there for the domain name or for the subdomain. 1 minute, priority of 20, destination of that. Create. Next, TXT record. Copy this. There's no priority and 1 hour or lowest allowed for the TTL. Click on TXT. Put in the subdomain in our case, 1 minute for the TTL and the value, paste it right in there. And then for the CNAME, do this again, copy that, 3600 or lowest allowed for the TTL. CNAME record, put in our subdomain, add 1 minute, resolves to that, then click on create. And we're all done. All the records have been created. And now we have our email being routed to Rackspace. Whatever email is being sent to the subdomain, in our case in this video, from cw.rvingwithfamily.com, will go to Rackspace. For you, it's probably the main domain. So whatever your domain name is, any email being sent to it is now being routed to Rackspace because of these records that we set up. All the rest we can set up inside of Cloudways. If we go back to our Cloudways account, under the grid option, we have add-ons. Add-ons takes us here. We have a Rackspace email. Click on the pencil, and we start filling out the forms to create new mailboxes. So let's create a new inbox called info@cw.rvingwithfamily.com. You would likely just have a root domain, so it'd just be for you like this, just the root domain. But for mine, we need to have the subdomain and a password. Let's just create a nice complicated password here, paste that in there and click on Save Changes. So we have to wait until that mailbox request has been validated just to make sure that we are actually the account that can be making that request and that the integration between Cloudways and Rackspace can proceed after it's been validated that it's the appropriate account trying to connect to the Rackspace account. Once that's happened, then we can go through the rest of the steps to add aliases, forwarding emails, and catch all emails. I don't know exactly how long this took because I set up what we did just a second ago, then I left to do something with the family, and then when I came back the next day to finish the recording, it was all done. So it took less than a day. My guess is it probably took even less than an hour, but I don't know for sure. But now Rackspace is enabled and the email address has been verified and it's been added as a mailbox. Now we can easily add more mailboxes now that we've been verified, and it will all run through Rackspace. And keep in mind, one email costs $1 a month. So if you add another one, it's going to cost $2. If you click on Add Mailbox, now it shows 2 emails, $2 a month. If I put the email address in here, enter a password, save changes, we now have 2 mailboxes at $2 a month. And these would be what you create for your team. So if you had multiple team members, you create an email address for each of them. And then if you had multiple addresses you wanted to go to the same email address, you would create aliases. For example, the info@ might be just a catch-all email address because lots of people email info@ just to try if it works. And maybe you want that to go to your email address. Or maybe you want this to be, sales@, marketing@. So we can create sales at this domain name, subdomain, and then we want to send that to Bjorn. Click on add, click on save changes. Now any emails that go to that email address will go to me. If you had team members who are responsible for sales and marketing, maybe you have multiple aliases that are throughout the website or even throughout different channels. Say you wrote a guest post somewhere, and in the guest post you put an email, and it could be outreach, sales, or information, or something else, and it's only on that guest post. And then all the emails that are sent to that email address, you can have routed to a real email, which we just did here by adding me as the members of this alias. And then you can see how many emails you get from that channel, from that guest post, or from wherever you put that custom alias email address. So that's a good use case for aliases. Forwarding mail, I would most often use when there's an email address that's no longer in use. For example, maybe you had a team member who was Samantha at whatever domain name is, and maybe they moved into a different position, maybe they left your company, maybe they're on maternity leave, who knows what, but you can forward the email address either permanently or temporarily by selecting the email address you want to forward. So let's pretend info is now not part of our business anymore. We want to forward it to Bjorn at that domain name, and then Bjorn at that domain name will get all those emails. You can also save copies of the forwarded email, meaning in this address, the copy will be saved. There'll be a copy sent to this address and also one saved here. And you can also add more emails. You can have up to 15 different email addresses that are being forwarded to. And as I mentioned, this can be permanent or temporary. If you want it to be permanent, just make this change and don't change it again. Click on Save Changes and just leave that as it is. If you want it to be temporary, for someone who's maybe gone on mat leave or extended vacation, you can come back in here and just delete that forwarding for that email address once they come back, and then the forwarding's turned off. A catch-all email address is an email that collects all emails that are sent to your domain name, but an inbox doesn't exist. For example, if your email is info at your domain name and someone makes a typo in the info before the at, or if someone just makes up something random like 1234 at your domain name, those can all be sent to a catch-all inbox. So you'd select your domain, you'd select the email address, you can make a new one just for your catch-all if you want, or just have it sent to any one of these. And catch-all addresses are not filtered for spam. So keep that in mind. You might not want to have your main email address as the catch-all. Click on Save Changes when you have your catch-all settings set up. And now that will catch all emails sent to your domain as long as the domain name is spelled properly. As long as everything after the at is spelled properly, this email address will catch the emails no matter what is before the at. And there's a Help tab, which will help you with anything you need for this integration. And there we have our website set up and ready to go inside of Cloudways. If you want more information about Cloudways, click on the link in the description down below. It'll take you here. It is an affiliate link. If you end up purchasing through that link, I do get a commission, and that helps me keep making these videos for you. And it does not make it more expensive for you to buy through my link. It's just that I get some credit for it. Come here and check out Cloudways and see if the features are for you. Go through the different pricing options to see if this is something you need. This would be for websites that are established and have some traffic. The hosting is more expensive here because you have to pay for Cloudways, you have to pay for the server, then you have to pay for the email, then you have to pay for each additional thing you add on. So it is going to end up costing more than regular hosting, and it's something you'd want to do if you have a site that you're really working hard on, that you're getting traction on, that's growing and growing. You want to have a scalable server that you can scale at any time you want, and Cloudways can do that for you. So go to the website and check out the features and figure out if this is something for you. And they have the free trial, which no other host has that I know of, where you can actually give it a test go for 3 days and see if it's what you need. And next up, check out this tutorial right here, where we see how fast Cloudways is compared to NitroPack on SiteGround and other tools and hosts. So check out that video to see if Cloudways might be the fastest host you can find. Check that out. And if you haven't done so yet, click subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. My name is Bjorn Allpass in WP Learning Lab. Until next time, keep crushing it, and I will see you in the next video.